up is a very serious topic, and that's about the state Supreme Court. We're not talking about the U.S. Supreme Court and Brett Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas. We can go on for days on that subject. But we're going to talk about the South Carolina State Supreme Court. There are 5 justices on that state Supreme Court, and they've been in the news a lot lately. Normally, they're a boring group. Normally, you don't hear much about the stuff they weigh in on. But this year, they've ruffled some feathers. Number one and primary was how the state Supreme Court struck down the fetal heartbeat bill that was signed into law a couple of years back. And this was a law, a very restrictive law, one of the strongest in the countries, that says at the moment a fetal heartbeat is detected, which, by the way, anybody in the medical profession will tell you, there is no heart. You're seeing cardiac cells contract, something you can reproduce in a petri dish. But regardless of the science, they implemented that law saying at 6 weeks, a woman has no control over her body, and that's for many women well before they even know they're pregnant and have the opportunity to make a choice. But that was struck down under the constitutional right to privacy that the state constitution has, which is one of the few states in the country that has that. I mean, even the U.S. Constitution doesn't have it, but the state constitution does. And 3 justices sided in favor of that argument and 2 dissented. So in a 3-2 vote, that was struck down. Well, you can imagine how mad it made those middle-aged white men in Columbia. It made them mad, furious. And they said that this is, when the Supreme Court doesn't go their way, they call it legislating from the bench, that they're out of their lane. They need to be controlled. And it's an interesting arrangement South Carolina has, in which it's those same legislators, the Senate and the House, that actually vote on the Supreme Court justice nominations and appointments. It's not appointed by the governor. It's not elected by us. It's the state representatives that do it. One of the Supreme Court justices is set to retire. There are 4 men and 1 woman that's on the state Supreme Court. Guess which one is retiring? The woman. All right, she is retiring. Guess who she will be replaced with? A man. So we will be, and you'll see it, the only state in the country with an all-male Supreme Court. And you talk about representation. We are so far back into the 1800s, it's not even funny. So anyhow, that's a precursor to a short video clip, 5 minutes, that I want to show you. How many of you know the name Billy Garrett? Okay, by the sound of it, most of you do know that name. He has been our state senator since 2020, I believe, or 2018. No, 2020. 2020. All right, it's a 4-year term. And he's going to be up for election again next year. But he's been our state senator. And I think it's very important that you see him in action. So this clip you're about to see occurred last week. It is Billy Garrett debating another Republican senator, Sandy Senn from Charleston. So it's Republican on Republican crime here. And you're going to see Billy Garrett speaking at the podium, outraged about the state Supreme Court decision, and you'll see Sandy Senn countering his argument. So you ready to see this?
Senator from Charleston, Senator Senn, what purpose do you ask me?
To see if the senator would yield for a question.
Senator, yield for a question. Senator, yield for a question.
Sorry. Senator, you mentioned that you've practiced law for 40 years, and so I am loath to ask you this, but you do remember that there is such a thing called the separation of powers.
Yes.
Okay. And what you're really saying to this body, though, is that...
Don't put words in my mouth. I don't say that I'm really saying.
Okay, well, then let me ask you. I heard you say that there should be a process for this legislative body to rope in rogue judges. What is your procedure for that, and how would it not violate the separation of powers?
That's my point. That's what I was saying. I was looking through our Constitution to try to find some way to protect the body and the people of this state against that kind of a circumstance. And the only thing I found was a constitutional provision said that that the General Assembly has the right to determine issues of disqualifications and what is a basis for disqualifications. Right there in the Constitution.
Sir.
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't answer my question, though. What is your remedy? What is it that you want? When a judge goes rogue, as you have mentioned about this crab in the pot, what is it that you think that we should do?
Follow the Constitution.
Which means you can't do squat in that when that judge is still elected, right?
No, that's not true. That's not what this provision provides.
So what is it? Tell me what you think that provision says, because clearly, the constitutional law would not exist if we all read the Constitution the same way.
Okay, that's fine. If you can tell me, again, I know there are those who have a broad reading of the Constitution, but it was pretty straightforward what I read to you that came directly out of the Constitution in that section of the Constitution providing for disqualification for judges from time to time.
So remind me, though, I got a little bleary-eyed when you kept reading. It's difficult to listen to somebody just read. Can you just paraphrase for me? Tell me what it is in the Constitution that you believe would allow us to rope in a rogue judge.
Article 5, Section 19.
Okay, and you believe if that's the case, if it says what you says it does, Article 5, Section 14, is that what you said?
You can read it. It's in the Constitution.
Article 5, Section 14?
Article 5, Section 14.
Of our state's
19 under the Judicial Department.
19 under the Judicial Department, so for our state. You think that would in any way, if it does say what you say it says, violate the separation of powers?
No, because it's in the Constitution.
But the separation of powers is federal.
Well,
and this state constitution would be subservient to the federal law, would it not?
State constitutions can be subservient to federal law where federal law has preempted the state law.
So in this instance, you think that South Carolina could say, okay, judges, we're going to elect you to a certain amount of terms, and then we want you to follow the canons, which is to be independent. But when you give us a ruling that we think is rogue, well, we've got this little constitutional provision in here, and we should be able to rope you in and pull you off the bench.
Absolutely. Let me say this. Absolutely, I believe that. Okay, let me answer the question for you. Also, if you're a strict constructionist and you read the separation of powers doctrine in South Carolina under Article 1, Section 8, it clearly says that in the government of the state, the legislative, executive, judicial power of the government shall forever be separate and distinct from each other, and no person or persons exercising the function of one of said departments shall assume or discharge the duties of another. And what I'm saying, rogue means you got out of your lane and you tried to legislate as a super legislature. Look, I didn't say this. Justice Kittredge said it, okay? Look at his dissent. If you'll read his dissent, he's the one that said it. And if his own people is calling him that.
And it's called a dissent for a reason, and that is because his side lost, right?
There were 5 opinions and none of them jived.
Right.
And none of them dealt with the question that was literally that needed to be asked, and that is a balance between the rights of an unborn child versus a mother's right to privacy.
So, sir, if 5 people cannot agree, 5 judges cannot agree, how in the world do you think this legislature is supposed to agree?
It did. It passed the fetal heartbeat bill.
And in that fetal heartbeat bill, what the crab in the pot that you say has gone rogue, why don't you just give us a name? Give us a name. Who's that crab in the pot that went rogue?
You used the name of a jurist. I mean, you can read the opinions. Listen, I appreciate the work of our Supreme Court. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not here to criticize our Supreme Court.
Well, what have you done?
I'm excited about our Supreme Court. But we need, as a legislature, when one goes off the chain, so to speak, we need to be able to bring that person back in. That's all I'm saying. And look, one of the dissenters who lost, okay.
Gentlemen.
Senator from Charleston.
Thank you, sir. One of the things I'm not sure that a lot of you may realize, and that is that women make up 51.4% of South Carolina's population. So we really are not in the minority. Women make up 37.4% of the South Carolina bar. At the 2 law schools in our state, women make up 52% of the student body at the USC School of Law and 62% at the Charleston School of Law. What you may not know is that South Carolina is about to become the only state in the entire nation to not have a female Supreme Court judge. And that is embarrassing. It is more embarrassing to me than us being at the bottom of the state with education or having lawyers that don't even understand the separation of powers. That's ridiculous. Right now, the 5 members of the Supreme Court are 4 male, 1 female. As we know, that's going to change. 4 white, 1 black. The black's going to come up next. And let me guess, I know what this legislature is going to want to do. Let's get a black female. Check, check. 2 boxes. Then we'll be nice and balanced. Court of Appeals, 9 members, 1 vacancy, 5 male, 3 male, 5 male, 3 females. A little more balanced there, right? 7 white, 1 black. Not quite balanced. Then we look at the circuit court. 49 seats, 1 vacancy. That one's getting ready to go to a male. So it's going to be 36 males, 13 females. Why is that when we are 37.4% of the bar? It's because we are not anywhere near balanced in this legislature. And I may not get to see a change. I'm one of 5. Half the time I feel invisible to y'all. I had a colleague yesterday say right in front of my face that he felt like that Supreme Court race went how it was supposed to go. Well, was I not standing right there?
Wow, what do you think? You know, sometimes you need to see that for yourselves. There is no way I could have described to you that transaction between the two. And you see the difference, regardless of party, you see the difference between a competent state senator and the other. Very different. You know, you're sitting there shuffling papers back. What was that? Either you know what you're talking about or you don't. So anyhow, we are heading into a very interesting time at the Supreme Court, and I wanted to make sure that you had some background on what was happening there.